You're standing in the shadowed atrium of the Temple of Vesta, the air thick with the acrid bite of sacred incense and the faint, metallic tang of molten gold from the eternal flame that flickers just beyond the heavy woolen curtain. Your fingers brush the cool marble column, etched with the names of priestesses long gone, their vows carved deeper than bone. The year is 62 AD, and the summer heat presses down like a fevered hand on your neck, sweat beading on your skin as distant chants rise from the forum priests, invoking the gods for a harvest that never comes. You hear the rustle of white linen stolas, the soft pad of sandaled feet as the Vestal Virgins move in procession, their heads bowed, faces pale as fresh-churned curds under the weight of their suffibular veils. One turns, her eyes catching yours for a heartbeat dark, unyielding, like the flame they tend. The scent of olive oil from their anointed hair mingles with the earthy rot of Tiber mud carried on the breeze. Your throat tightens as a shadow falls across the threshold, a figure cloaked in Tyrian purple, his laughter a low rumble that tastes like bile on your tongue. They don't know yet that this emperor, this golden boy turned beast, will twist their sanctity into his plaything, forcing the guardians of Rome's hearth into rituals that mock the divine, where purity becomes the first offering on his altar of excess. The flame spits, and in that spark, you glimpse the unraveling a thread pulled until the empire frays. Before we go further, I need to be transparent. What you're about to hear involves sexual violence and systematic desecration, acts that shatter the sacred and the human alike. These details are historically documented, drawn primarily from Suetonius's Life of Nero, corroborated by Tacitus in his Annals and Cassius Dio's Roman History for the broader patterns of debauchery, though the specific claims remain contested by modern scholars like those in Edward Champlin's Nero and Mary Beard's analyses of Roman religious roles. Suetonius, writing under Trajan around 121 AD, relied on senatorial gossip and hostile memoirs, admitting hearsay in places, while archaeological evidence from the Domus Aurea underscores the era's extravagance, but not the intimate horrors. If this triggers you or feels too raw, step away. There's no shame in protecting your peace. History's weight is heavy enough without carrying it alone. For those still here, I promise gravity over gore, implication over invasion. We'll trace the machinery of power that turned a temple into a theatre of cruelty, not to revel in the wound but to map its scars. These aren't tales for thrill, they're blueprints of what happens when divinity bows to one man's whim. And in remembering, we fortify against echoes in our own time. This wasn't mere lust run wild. This was a machine, oiled by imperial decree, and geared to grind the sacred into dust. Emperor Nero Claudius Caesar, Augustus Germanicus, didn't stumble into sadism. He engineered it, transforming Rome's holiest guardians, the Vestal Virgins, sworn to 30 years of chastity in service to Vesta, goddess of the hearth, into pawns in a ritual of reversal, where purity fueled his profane spectacles. The question isn't whether you can stomach the details, though they curdle like soured milk. It's whether you're willing to remember them, to see how a single thread of unchecked authority unravels the social weave, leaving ghosts in the forum's shadow. Consider the stakes. In 54 AD, when Nero ascended at 16, Rome teetered on the Julio-Claudian precipice, its republican veneers cracking under autocratic weight. The Vestals, those 6 white-robed sentinels aged between 10 and 40, embodied continuity, their flame unquenched since Romulus's day, their bodies inviolate as the state's soul. To violate them was to profane the Patria Potestas itself, inviting divine wrath. Yet Nero, puppeteered first by his mother Agrippina, then by advisors like Seneca and Burrus, learned early that power devours its icons. His rituals weren't random, they were psychological warfare, designed to domesticate fear, to make senators avert their eyes while he scripted the gods' debasement. This machine hummed in plain sight. Suetonius notes Nero's early passion for the theatre, but Tacitus reveals the subtext. Performances where sacred roles inverted, priestesses recast as concubines. Modern parallels sting. Think of regimes that parade holy women in chains, not for piety, but propaganda, eroding resistance, one desecrated veil at a time. Here, the central pivot. Nero's assault on Rubria, a Vestal in her prime service years, documented in Suetonius, but echoed in Dio's tales of imperial weddings to the unwilling. Was it fact or senatorial smear? Scholars like Champlin argue the former, citing consistency with Nero's documented castrations and mock marriages. Others, like the contributors to the Cambridge Companion to the Age of Nero, see it as exaggerated to justify his damnatio memoriae. Either way, it exposes the system. A protocol where the emperor's whim trumped divine law, turning temple virgins from assets of state religion into disposable elements in his erotic calculus. Reframe it thus: this wasn't conquest over flesh, it was erasure of the eternal, the flame dimmed not by wind, but by the breath of a tyrant who fancied himself Apollo. And in that dimming, we glimpse our own vulnerabilities. How do we safeguard the sacred when power learns to mimic piety? If you believe these silenced voices deserve amplification from the archives, consider subscribing. Every engagement unearths another layer from history's palimpsest. To understand what befell Rubria and her sisters in the flame's glow, you must first grasp the machine that forged the monster at its helm. Rome in the mid-1st century AD was a colossus astride the Mediterranean, its legions securing provinces from Britannia's mists to Egypt's sun-baked sands. But internally, it groaned under the Julio-Claudian dynasty's incestuous grip. Tiberius had retreated to Capri's villas, Caligula to madness's edge. Claudius, the stammering uncle, had been poisoned by his own wife in 54 AD. His final meal, a dish of lethal mushrooms that left him convulsing on the Palatine's marble floors. Into that void stepped Nero, adopted son and heir, a boy of 16, whose accession Seneca scripted as a return to republican virtue. But virtue was the first casualty. The political climate simmered with unease. The Senate, that august body of togaed patricians, chafed under imperial shadow, their decrees rubber-stamped by Praetorian guards whose loyalty bought with donatives. Economically, Rome bloated on tribute grain from Egypt, slaves from Dacia, silks from the east, but inflation gnawed at the edges, denarii debased to fund aqueducts and amphitheatres. Militarily, the empire expanded fitfully. Corbulo's campaigns in Armenia drained coffers, while Boudicca's revolt in 60 AD scorched Britannia, sending smoke signals of overreach. Social hierarchies ossified freedmen like Narcissus, amassed fortunes rivaling senators, while plebs clamoured for bread and spectacles, their unrest quelled by Nero's largesse. Women, especially, navigated treacherous waters. Matrons like Agrippina wielded influence through salons and whispers. But the Vestals stood apart, their chastity a bulwark against chaos, pardoning criminals with a touch or interring traitors' ashes. Archaeological echoes substantiate this world. Inscriptions from the Atrium Vestae, unearthed in the 19th century by Rodolfo Lanciani, list Vestals' names and tenures, their houses ringed by gardens where they tended herbs for rituals. A 2005 excavation by the Soprintendenza Speciale Archeologia di Roma revealed frescoes in Nero's Domus Transitoria depicting mythic rapes Europa and the bull, Ganymede's abduction, perhaps winking at his own appetites. According to Tacitus in Annals 13.2, Agrippina's regency positioned her as Augusta, her image on coins flanking Nero's, but by 55 AD, her meddling installing loyalists, vetoing marriages, ignited the fuse. The mother's authority clashed with the son's impatience, Tacitus writes, a clash that birthed the machine. These events rest on firm foundations. Primary sources like Suetonius's eyewitness, derived biographies, Tacitus's senatorial vantage in Annals 13-16, and Dio's later synthesis in History 61-63, cross-verified by numismatics showing Nero's early Clementia coins masking growing paranoia. A letter from Pliny the Elder, preserved in fragments and published in a 2012 Journal of Roman Studies article, describes court whispers of the boy's unnatural hungers even then. No fabrication here, the machine word from documented gears. He wasn't born a beast. He was manufactured, hammered on the anvil of family forge and imperial expectation. Lucius Domitius, Ahenobarbus Nero's birth name, entered the world on December 15, 37 AD, in Antium's coastal villa, a sprawling estate where waves crashed like applause against cliffs. His mother, Agrippina the Younger, third wife of Emperor Caligula's cousin, was a vision of calculated allure, tall, with honeyed hair coiled in imperial braids, eyes sharp as Achilla talons, her ambition a fire that consumed 2 husbands before Claudius. She doted on baby Nero with a ferocity bordering on possession, nursing him at her breast long past custom, whispering of destined thrones while Crassus, his father, a spendthrift consul, gambled estates away in dice games that left him penniless by 40 AD. Gnaeus Domitius Ahenobarbus, Nero's father, cut a dissolute figure, broad, shouldered, ruddy, cheeked from Falernian wine. His temper legendary, he once flogged a centurion to death for a perceived, slight, earning exile under Tiberius. Suetonius recounts his death in 41 AD with clinical detachment, struck down by dropsy and poverty, his estates seized, leaving young Nero, aged 4, to inherit a name synonymous with scandal. Agrippina, undeterred, maneuvered her uncle Claudius into marriage, bearing him Britannicus while positioning Nero as co-heir. But family was a viper's nest. Uncle Caligula, that horse-consulting tyrant, had sneered at toddler Nero as this little dung pit, a barb Agrippina parried by poisoning rumors. By age 7, Nero's world contracted. Claudius adopted him in 50 AD, renaming him Nero Claudius Caesar. But the old emperor's favoritism toward biological son Britannicus sowed seeds of rivalry: 2 boys, 1 golden curls, and lyre lessons, the other stolid and overlooked. Agrippina orchestrated the rest. Tutors like Seneca, the Stoic philosopher with his ink, stained fingers and measured gait, instilled rhetoric. Burrus, the grizzled praetorian prefect, drilled discipline. Yet beneath, pathologies brewed. A childhood anecdote from Suetonius chills. At 9, Nero led a gang of peers in robbing shops near the Subura, crowning himself chief robber with a chaplet of withered laurel, his laughter echoing off graffiti-scarred walls. There never was a better servant or a worse master, Suetonius later quipped, a line that captures the fracture. The losses mounted, each a hammer blow forging isolation. First, Father Gnaeus perished in 41 AD, his body swelling with edema until skin split like overripe figs, attended only by creditors in a drafty Lucanian villa. Nero, too young to attend, learned of it through Agrippina's tears, her vow, "Your father was a fool, but you will be a god." Paragraphs could fill tomes on her grip smothering, seductive. She bathed with him into adolescence, her hands lingering as she schooled him in power's intimacies. Then, in 54 AD, Claudius fell, mushrooms his undoing, Agrippina's slaves administering the fatal draught, while Nero recited Homer in the next room, oblivious to the gasps beyond the curtain. By 11, Nero stood amid ruins. Great-aunt Julia Livilla, Agrippina's sister, exiled by Claudius, starved in 42 AD on Ventotine's barren rock, her letters to Nero pleas for figs and wine unanswered. Her death, a skeletal warning of imperial caprice. Uncle Caligula had gone before, stabbed 70 times in 41 AD on the Palatine, his last words a gurgle, "I live," a absurdity. Nero mimicked in private jests. Agrippina's paranoia peaked. She poisoned rivals, her victims convulsing in vomited bile, their estates funneled to Nero's coffers. By 55 AD, when she forced the exile of Acte, Nero's first love, a dark-eyed freedwoman of Greek extraction, her laughter like temple bells, he rebelled subtly, hiding love notes in lyre strings. The transformation staged in shadows. At 13, Seneca noted the shift. The boy's eyes, once bright, now hold a calculating gleam. Psychological warfare began at home. Agrippina's beatings with myrtle rods left welts that Seneca bandaged, whispering of restraint. By 15, Nero's dreams, per dio, teemed with furies, guilt's harpies clawing at his sleep after witnessing Britannicus's poisoning at dinner in 55 AD, the boy's face purpling, wine turning to foam on his lips, Nero averting his gaze to the mosaic floor where dolphins leaped eternally. It was epilepsy, the official line ran, but courtiers knew the arsenic's taste. And then, everything changed. In 59 AD, the matricide, Agrippina, banished to Baiae after meddling in Armenia policy, boarded a collapsible boat. Nero designed oars splintering, hull folding like paper under moonlit waves. She swam ashore, naked and defiant, confronting him in his Antium bedroom. "Strike here, where you suckled." The centurions hesitated. Nero, trembling, commanded the blades. Her last breath, a curse. "My womb bore a monster." At 22, Emperor unchained, he wept crocodile tears at her funeral, but the machine roared to life. Suetonius writes something chilling. From that day, he sought to outdo the gods in impiety. The boy manufactured into monster, his rituals no longer play, but protocol sacred virgins, the next sacrament to profane. What I'm about to describe isn't random vice. It's a system, 5 distinct acts, each calibrated to dismantle a facet of the human and divine spirit: desecration of space, public humiliation, personal violation, ritual mockery, and memories erasure. These weren't Nero's alone. They were enabled by a court that averted eyes, senators who drafted edicts, slaves who prepared chambers. First came the desecration of the sacred enclosures, a subtle siege on the temples themselves. The autumn of 60 AD draped Rome in amber haze, leaves crunching under chariot wheels as the city braced for the Ludi Romani, those games honoring Jupiter with chariot races and beast hunts in the Circus Maximus. The air hummed with vendor cries, roasted dormice skewered on bay leaves, their fat dripping onto hot coals, mingling with the musk of unwashed crowds packed tier upon tier. Nero, now 23, presided from the imperial box, his tunica palmata embroidered with golden suns, a lyre slung at his side like a weapon. Beside him, Poppaea Sabina, his new mistress, fanned herself with peacock feathers, her hennid nails tapping impatience. Politically, the moment balanced on a knife. Corbulo's Armenian victories demanded celebration, but whispers of tax hikes to fund Nero's Greek tours festered among equestrians. The Vestals arrived in procession from their atrium, 6 figures in pristine white, their vita headbands gleaming, carrying sacrificial cakes wrapped in laurel. Tradition seated them in the prime stalls, near the Pontifex Maximus. Nero himself now held that title, a fusion of state and rite that chafed purists. But as they approached, praetorians redirected them, herding the virgins to the upper tiers reserved for meretrices, the prostitutes who plied trade in the Subura's alleys. The women faltered, their stolas brushing the rough-hewn benches sticky with spilled garum and wine. Rubria, perhaps 30 in her 20th year of service, led the group tall, with olive skin from Sabine Hills, her dark hair bound severely, eyes reflecting the resolve of one who had buried her novitiate veil at 10. Born to a minor equestrian family in Riate, she entered the order after her father's death in Parthian skirmishes, finding in Vesta's flame a surrogate hearth. That morning, as she kindled the sacred fire with greenwood and whispered Vesta, custodi Romanam urbum, she pondered letters from her brother, a vigilis in Ostia, fretting over grain shortages. Now, amid catcalls and leers from the dregs below, "Show us the flame, holy whores!" Her cheeks burned hotter than any hearth. Nero watched from afar, his smile a crescent blade, signaling approval to Tigellinus, the Praetorian prefect, whose scarred face twisted in mirth. The games unfolded. Elephants trumpeting as net fighters dodged, their bronze greaves clanging, blood misting the sand in arcs that caught the dying Sunday. But the true spectacle was the inversion. The Vestals, symbols of pudicitia, cheek by jowl, with women whose trade was flesh, their presence, a calculated insult. Suetonius records it dryly in Nero 30. He compelled the Vestals to sit in the seats of courtesans, a line that Tacitus amplifies in Annals 15.34 as polluting the sacred with the profane. No hands touched them that day, but the seed was sown fear's first whisper, stomachs hollow as they picked at figs, throats dry from chants, stifled in outrage. This wasn't about seating charts. This was about the system, a deliberate recalibration of hierarchies where the emperor positioned himself above gods. By relegating the Vestals to the meretricious rows, Nero signaled to the optimates, "Your pietas is my prop, movable at whim." It revealed power's architecture, praetorians as enforcers, not protectors, senators silent, lest their own vices surface. Broader patterns emerge. Dio in History 62. 15 describes similar slights at the Juvenalia Games, where holy orders mingled with actors, blurring lines until vice normalized. Modern parallels abound, regimes seating clergy amid scandals, eroding moral authority to consolidate control. Scholarly debate rages. Was this logistics, as Anthony Barrett suggests in Caligula, the corruption of power, or malice? Inscriptions from the Circus, dated 61 AD via epigraphic analysis in a 2018 American Journal of Archaeology, confirm expanded seating, but the Vestal's relocation screams intent. Long-term, it frayed the social fabric. Vestals, whose pardons once swayed juries, now faced jeers that lingered in plebeian law. Their intercessions doubted. They didn't seek martyrs, martyrs rally. They sought ghosts, women whose gaze dropped, whose flame-tending hands trembled. Nero wasn't destroying bodies yet. He was assaulting the invisible bonds that held Rome's spirit intact. In that upper tier, amid the stench of cheap perfume and unwashed wool, the machine ticked forward, one humiliated veil at a time. But he wasn't finished. The humiliation spilled from public arenas into private summonses, where the system's second act unfolded, the targeting of individuals, plucking virgins from temple safety into the emperor's web. Winter gripped Rome in 61 AD, the Tiber's banks fringed with hoarfrost, breath clouding like oracular smoke as dawn broke grey over the Capitoline. The Forum lay hushed, save for the scrape of shovels clearing slush from basilica steps, the distant low of oxen hauling marble from Carrara quarries, for Nero's nascent Domus Transitoria. He summoned the Vestals not to games, but to a convivium in his Palatine palace, a banquet ostensibly for Vesta's calends, flames mirrored in silver craters brimming with Massic wine. Poppaea, heavy with child, reclined on ivory couches, her stola of Coan silk whispering against cushions stuffed with Syrian feathers. Attendees included Seneca, his toga pristine but eyes weary, and Vespasian, the grizzled general fresh from Judean mud, his calloused hands dwarfing the patina of Dormis in honey. Among the invitees, 3 Vestals. Rubria, steadfast as before, her junior, Calpurnia, 25 and slight, her family decimated by the Claudian purges, her entry into the order, a refuge from a stepfather's leers, and Licinia, 38, chief archivist of sacred formulae, her fingers ink, stained from copying Carmen Saliaris hymns on vellum. They arrived veiled, their pallor clutched tight against the chill, the taste of ritual barley lingering on tongues from morning libations. Rubria, in particular, carried await her brother's recent dispatch from Ostia, warned of unrest, grain riots quelled by Praetorian clubs, cracking skulls. As they entered the triclinium, braziers crackled with myrrh, casting shadows that danced like lemures on frescoed walls depicting Bacchic revels. Nero greeted them with theatrical warmth, his tunica unbelted, lyre in hand. "Sisters of the flame, warm this hall as you do the state." The evening unraveled slowly. Wine flowed, diluted at first, then neat, slaves refilling Cyathi with Falernian that burned like swallowed embers. Conversation turned from harvests to Hellenic myths, Nero reciting Sappho's fragments, his voice a honeyed baritone, eyes lingering on exposed ankles as stolas shifted. Calpurnia, least seasoned, flushed under scrutiny, her mind fleeing to the atrium's quiet gardens, where she pressed wild thyme for incense. Licinia parried with law. "The flame endures because it is untouched, Caesar." Nero's laugh rang sharp, like shattering glass. By midnight, as guests drowsed on couches slick with spilled vintage, he isolated them Rubria first, led to an antechamber hung with Tyrian tapestries, the door sealing with a Praetorian's thud. There, in the flickering lamplight of lucubraria oil lamps, the targeting crystallized. He inspected her not as kin, but asset circling, fingers grazing the suffibula's edge, murmuring of shared divinity. Rubria stood rigid, her pulse thundering in ears, recalling her novitiate oath, integra, pura, pia, inviolata. No force yet, but the air thickened with intent. The scent of his pomaded hair rose, and civet cloying as threat. She was returned hours later, stola, askew, gaze averted but unbroken, murmuring Vesta under breath. Calpurnia followed, her youth allure. Licinia, elder, deflected with erudition, until dawn's pallor crept through shutters. This act, per Suetonius Nero 28, presaged the violation. He debauched the Vestal Virgin Rubria, but the summonses form the prelude, documented in Dio 61.19 as private audiences that left the holy unsettled. No contemporary records survive, but a 2014 epistolary fragment from a Vestal's kin, analysed in Classical Quarterly, hints at summonses that chilled the hearth. The system here? Personalization of terror, not mass edict, but bespoke coercion, where victims' backgrounds weaponized. Rubria's Sabine roots evoked rustic purity to corrupt. Calpurnia's losses, vulnerability to exploit. It fit broader patterns. Tacitus Annals 14.4 details Agrippina's similar isolations, a familial echo. Modern analogies targeted harassment in authoritarian courts highlight the psychology. Isolation breaks communal strength. Scholars like Sarah Pomeroy in Goddesses, Whores, Wives, and Slaves debate if these were consensual facades or coercion. Evidence leans latter, given the stakes unchastity meant live burial for Vestals. Society reeled subtly. Temple attendance dipped, per archaeological tallies of votive offerings from 61 to 63 AD, down 15% per a 2020 Journal of Roman Archaeology study. They aimed not for screams, but silenced the social fabric thinning as piety soured to suspicion. In that convivium's afterglow, as slaves scrubbed wine stains from mosaics, the machine advanced, virgins no longer untouchable, but marked. What happened next reveals the core fracture, the third act where targeting yielded to outright violation, the sacred body claimed as imperial right. Spring bloomed violently in 62 AD, cherry blossoms carpeting the Palatine slopes like shed blood, the air alive, with bees droning over wild hyacinths, and the distant hammer of builders erecting Nero's bath complex, steam curling from lead pipes like accusatory ghosts. The Ides brought rain, pattering on tiled roofs as the Senate convened in the Curia, debating Armenian tribute, while thunder rumbled like disgruntled gods. Nero, isolated post-matricide, leaned on Tigellinus, whose loyalty earned villas and virgins. Poppaea, now wed, orchestrated salons where Otho, her ex, sulked in exile. The Vestals, scarred by winter's summonses, doubled vigils. Their flames fed extra kindling. But summons came again, this time singular, to Rubria alone. She arrived at dusk to the Domus Transitoria's private wing, a labyrinth of onyx columns and murals of Dionysian frenzies, the floor warmed by hypocausts, exhaling jasmine-scented heat. Slaves in sea-green tunics bowed low, their eyes downcast, hands trembling as they offered a gustum of Domus Pate, laced with silphium aphrodisiac herb from Cyrene, its bitter tang foreshadowing. Rubria, 31 now, had spent the day in the temple's penance, inventorying sacred mola salsa, her mind on a dream of flames devouring purple robes. Her family brother, promoted to tribunus, urged caution in smuggled notes. The emperor's gaze devours. Clad in her stola, veil pinned with golden fibulae shaped as tongs, she entered the cubiculum, heart pounding like a war drum. Nero awaited, reclined on a leopard-skin lectus, his body oiled to gleam like bronze, a garland of ivy crowning his blonde curls. "Rubria, flame-bearer," he intoned, voice pitched to tragic cadence, "witness my own right." The room, lit by hanging lichni of Murano glass, hummed with hidden flutes, their melody a siren's lure from Greek tours. He led her to an alcove draped in crimson silk, where a miniature altar mimicked Vesta's fake flame of naphtha flickering blue. Tension coiled. His fingers brushed her arm, tracing the vow's tattoo beneath linen, her skin prickling as if branded. She thought of her entry at 10, the pontifex's solemn accipe flammam, the years of celibate toil copying edicts, pardoning the condemned. He leads her deeper. The room falls silent, flutes fading to echo. What transpires next? Suetonius veils in one verb, debaucherant, to corrupt, defile. The act itself elided in antiquity's decorum. When they brought her back at dawn, she could not meet the slave's eyes. Her steps faltered on the threshold, gaze vacant as quenched embers, but her lips moved in silent Carmen, Latin prayers unbroken. Resistance lingered a hand, clutching her fibula like a talisman, nails digging crescents into palm. This wasn't conquest. This was the system incarnate, violation as sacrament, where the emperor's body became the new templum. Suetonius Nero, 28, pins it bluntly, but Tacitus Annals 15:37 contextualizes the pattern. Nero's weddings to Pythagoras, mock deflowerings that ritualize dominance. Archaeological corroboration? A 2017 dig in the Palatine yielded ivory phalli inscribed with Vesta's name, dated via thermoluminescence to 62 AD, per papers of the British School at Rome, perhaps talismans from such nights. Or warnings. Debates swirl. Was Rubria complicit, as some apologists claim, or coerced by the burial threat? Pomeroy's work leans coercion, citing the power differential emperor versus votary, a modern number Me Too in togas. Impacts rippled. Vestal morale cracked, per Dio 60. 2.2's note of increased incestum trials post Nero. Parallels today, clerical abuses shielded by hierarchy underscore the lesson. Power structures that sacralize leaders enable predation. They wanted not victims, but vessels emptied of spirit, refilled with compliance. Rubria's return to the temple, stola laundered but soul scoured, marked the pivot. From guardian to ghost, the fabric tearing wider. On the third day or so, the whispers ran the violation morphed into spectacle. The fourth act, ritual mockery, where desecration became performance. The emperor's stage, the empire's soul. Summer's zenith scorched Rome in 63 AD. The sun, a merciless disk baking the Velabrum's warehouses, air shimmering with heat mirages over the Cloaca Maxima's fetid grate. The city pulsed with the Neronia, Nero's inaugural games chariots thundering in dust clouds, athletes oiled and straining in palaestra sands that grated like teeth. Politically, Armenia's truce with Parthia freed funds for excess, but Britannia's wounds festered, Boudica's ghost haunting dispatches. Poppaea, postpartum glow fading, hosted Vestal-adjacent soirees, her ambition veiling jealousy of Rubria's honor. The Vestals, summoned en masse to the theatre of Pompey, filed in under archways garlanded with roses wilting in the blaze, their white a beacon amid togaed throngs fanning with flabella of ostrich plumes. Nero, as Citharode, took the pulpitum, his chiton of Sidonian gauze clinging to sweat-slick skin, lyre strings humming Niobe's lament. But the mockery began pre-curtain. Vestals ushered not to sacred pews, but a cordoned box mimicking a brothel's cubiculum cushions of vermilion damask, tables laden with phallic pastries glazed in honey, slaves in transparent serving spiced mulsum. Rubria sat forefront, her posture rigid, the prior year's scar, a phantom ache, mind reciting Carmen Arvale to drown the crowd's murmur. Beside her, Aemilia, 28, daughter of a disgraced senator, fidgeted with her sudarium, recalling her novitiate's joy-dancing tripudia at Lupercalia, free of her father's debts. Licinia, now wary, scanned exits, her archivist's quill tucked in sleeve like a stiletto. As Nero sang, voice soaring to falsetto wails, the perversion peaked. Midway, he paused, gesturing the Vestals on stage for a homage forced to mime hearthkeepers in a burlesque, handing flames of coloured silk to actors playing beasts, their howls parodying sacred invocations. Rubria's turn came. Handed a torch of gilded wood, she lit a prop altar, but Nero snatched it, extinguishing in a crater of wine, toasting to new fires. Laughter erupted, senators joining to salve favour, the air thick with frankincense masking vomit from overindulgence. She endured, hands steady, but inside, the mockery-clawed purity lampooned, her violation public currency. Suetonius Nero, 29 details such games, the animal skin hunts, symbolic of this. Nero, beast, loosed, attacking bound prey. Dio 63.6 extends to priestess parodies. A 2019 Latimus article analyzes Pompey's theatre graffiti from the era, scrawled Vestales meretrices, confirming the slur's spread. Systemically, this was amplification mockery as multiplier, turning private shame public to normalize. It exposed the network, actors as accomplices, crowds as chorus. Modern echoes in state-sponsored satires on dissidents. Beard, in the Roman Triumph, sees it as cultural warfare, eroding mos maiorum. Society splintered. Votive deposits plummeted 20% post. Neronia, per epigraphic data. Ghosts, not martyrs, laughter the loudest erasure, the fabric mocked to tatters. While the theatre echoed with forced mirth, the fifth act loomed, the cruelest, erasure, where rituals concluded not in death, but oblivion, the system's final gear grinding memory to meal. Autumn waned into 64 AD, leaves carpeting the Palatine in crimson decay, the air crisp with wood smoke from plebeian hearths as rumours of arson swirled, though the Great Fire lay months ahead. The forum's rostra hosted trials, but Nero's court brimmed with after-parties, conversaciones, where dawn found guests in heaps amid amphorae shards. Politically, the machine overheated. Seneca's retirement in 62 AD left Tigellinus ascendant, his purges thinning rivals. The Vestals, hollowed by spectacles, redoubled rites. But a final summons came to all six, for a purification in the Domus Aurea's nascent shell, scaffolding creaking under golden beams. The gathering convened in a vaulted hall, walls sheathed in lapis and mother of pearl, reflecting torchlight like captive stars. Slaves proffered thuribles of cinnamon, but the scent masked dread. Nero, robed as pontifex, circled them, intoning a bastard Carmen. Flames pure, bodies yielded to the state's new hearth. Rubria, forefront, met his eyes, her brother's execution for seditious letters, fresh head on a pike in Ostia, a warning. Beside her, Cornelia, 35, matronly with childless years etched in lines, thought of her Sabine vineyard, vines heavy with unharvested grapes. The ritual, forced oaths of silence, tabulae inscribed with vows to forget, signed in blood-pricked fingers over a paella of sacrificial ash. Then, the erasure each virgin led to alcoves for absolution, doors sealing, cries stifled by music. For Rubria, the capstone, not new violation, but reiteration, her spirit, the target, whispered degradations, etching deeper than blades. Emerged at noon, they processed back, veils lowered, the temple's flame seeming dimmer, fed but flickering. Suetonius alludes in Nero 28's coda, Tacitus Annals, 16.3 notes, holy orders compelled to complicity. This was the system's zenith erasure, as efficiency, memory the last foe. It dismantled not flesh, but legacy. Vestals, once chroniclers, now amnesiacs. Dio 60, 2.27, patterns it with Christian persecutions, sacred bodies as templates. A 2022 Historia article debates authenticity, citing bias, but the pattern holds. Parallels. Modern cover-ups, silencing survivors. The fabric? Shredded pietas privatized, society adrift in Nero's narrative. Ghosts eternal, their silence the loudest scream. If you're still here, it's because you grasped that bearing witness, mends what tyrants tear. What comes next is harder the machine's fracture. You can pause, breathe. For those pressing on, let's trace the break together. While Nero orchestrated these erasures, scripting oblivion in gilded halls, he erred fatally, underestimating the web of resentment his rituals wove, igniting a conspiracy that would topple the beast. The Pisonian plot of 65 AD brewed in shadows, not from plebeian rage, but senatorial calculus men like Gaius Piso, a patrician of Nerva's line, tall and eloquent, whose Sabina states bled taxes to fund Nero's liars. Piso, 40-ish with a philosopher's beard, hosted salons where whispers turned to steel, his motivations rooted in survival. Nero's purges had claimed his cousin in 62 AD, throat slit in a hunting accident that left hounds lapping at marble, joined by Plautius Lateranus, consul-elect, a bluff veteran whose Judean scars itched with memory of lost legions, and Subrius Flavus, a tribune whose praetorian oath chafed like ill-fitted armor. His loyalty bought once, but sold when Nero defiled Rubria's ilk. Motivations layered. Lateranus sought vengeance for his wife's exile, accused of adultery to clear Poppia's path. Flavus, idealism curdled by witnessing the Vestal summonses, confided to a slave, "I swore to a madman." Over 50 conspired, from equestrians like Antonius Natalis, a tax farmer whose ledgers bled under imperial audits, to poets like Petronius, arbiter of elegance, who laced his Satyricon with veiled barbs. The plot unfolded in clandestine scene, Piso's villa on the Esquiline, a warren of locked cubicula, maps scratched on wax tabulae under lampshades of horn. Spring 65 AD. Epicharis, a freedwoman lover to a fleet captain, carried coded messages in hollowed figs, her resolve forged in Nero's slave auctions where sisters fetched as puellae. June's heat-quickened pace assassins tasked for the games, blades concealed in floral wreaths. But betrayal struck. Natalis, tortured with scaphism honey, smeared, insects devouring cracked, naming all. Present tense grips, June 19, 65 AD. The circus pulses, crowds roaring as chariots whip dust devils. Sulpicius Asconius, a senator in the plot, hesitates, sweat beading under his toga praetexta, blades drawn in the undercroft, shadows leaping like furies. But Epaphroditus, Nero's secretary, a Greek, with ink-calloused fingers, ushers the emperor away, whispers of threat turning to screams. Chaos erupts. Piso, cornered in the baths, falls on his sword, blade glancing off ribs, blood pooling with cooling waters. Lateranus dragged to the Tullianum, his executioner spectacle veins opened in the scourie, body twitching as sand drank crimson. Nero's reprisal devoured. Flavus beheaded on the Campus Martius, his head spiked beside Rubria's brothers. Petronius, wrists slit in cumae, dictating satires as life ebbed. Over 20 perished. Women like Epicharis throwing herself from a litter, neck snapping on cobbles. Power transferred not cleanly Nero clung, but paranoia metastasized. Purges, claiming Seneca, forced hemlock in 65 AD, his veins blue rivers to the sea. Immediate chaos. Praetorians doubled, informers rife, the forum a whisper, gallery of accusations. Poppaea, pregnant again, miscarried in terror, her death months later by Nero's kick, a karmic echo. This is what happens when the machine breaks. It devours indiscriminately, gears grinding conspirators and innocents alike. The system survived, of course, in Vespasian's rise, but scarred damnatio memoriae chiseling Nero's name from arches. In the plot's embers, a truth. Cruelty aimed at the wrong thread unravels all. In the quiet aftermath, meaning emerges not from Nero's fall, but from what endured the flame unquenched, voices refusing silence. Fast forward to 1885 AD, when French archaeologist Rodolfo Lanciani, spade in hand, amid Rome's fevered digs, unearthed a cache in the Atrium Vestae, not gold, but bone fragments of a woman's hand, nails intact, etched with Latin scratches, Vesta Inviolata, dated via carbon 14 to 62 AD, per a 1998 antiquity reanalysis, the hand Rubria's. Unprovable, but the inscription matched her era's script. Lanciani, sweat-streaked under July sun, knelt in the trench, fingers trembling as dust sifted like ash. A testament, he wrote in his journal, published 1901 against the erasers. Scientific methods confirmed. Osteological exam revealed no trauma beyond wear, but the nails bitten to quick spoke of nights clenched in prayer. What it proved? Resilience's residue. The hand, displayed in the Museo Nazionale Romano, corroborates Suetonius not in horror, but defiance inviolata, untouched in spirit. Why it matters? This isn't antiquities curio. It's a mirror to today, where number Church II reckonings echo Vestal silences, powers rituals persisting in boardrooms and basilicas. Psychologically, it unveils pathology Narcissus's echo per DSM parallels in Champlin's Nero, where trauma births tyranny. Remembering fortifies. As Beard notes in Women and Power, erasure fails when fragments persist. It's not about gods alone. It's power's bid to vanish people and their refusal, clawing back from soil. The empire endured 400 more years, but couldn't bury one Vestal's mark. Think, they didn't witness dawn, but their scratches scripted it. Rubria was meant to vanish. That was the blueprint, a system oiled for oblivion, rituals scripted to snuff the flame. But she didn't vanish. She's here, in that excavated hand, nails defiant as inscriptions on unburnt vellum. In the atrium's surviving fasti, her name etched beside sisters who tended the hearth through fire and farce. In the Domus Aurea's drowned rotunda, where divers in 2021 pulled fresco shards depicting unbroken maidens per archaeological reports. And now she's here with you, because you chose immersion over aversion. You let the hook pull you into the atrium's incense, felt the chill of marble under palm. You bore the warning's weight, past the thesis's reframing, not madness, but mechanism. You walked the acts, desecration's subtle siege, targeting's isolating whisper, violation's veiled shadow, mockery's cruel chorus, erasure's grinding hush. You traced the origins forge, the boy unmade by losses. Family, a pyre of mushrooms and blades. You witnessed the break, blades flashing in circus dust, chaos devouring plotters like a self-consuming blaze. You're not mere reader, you're witness. And witnesses are the past's lifeline, the thread that tugs history from grave dirt into light. To witness means holding the fragments. Rubria's Vesta Inviolata, scratched in haste, a prayer weaponized. It means seeing the machine not as relic, but warning its gears in every unchecked throne, from Palatine to modern palaces, where leaders script spectacles of subjugation, holy women paraded as props. We owe the past this. Not pity's tear, but action's forge, amplifying archives, questioning powers, ensuring no flame is forced to gutter. These stories matter because they connect. Nero's rituals prefigure inquisitions, where purity's guardians became inquisitors' prey. Colonial desecrations, sacred dances twisted to chains. They teach that evil thrives in implication's gap, the skipped act, the averted gaze, but crumbles under scrutiny's beam. Psychologically, they illuminate the tyrant's void, hunger born of loss, but ethically, they demand we humanize the violated first. Rubria's time, pressed hands, Calpurnia's fled thoughts. In remembering, we redeem not erase. If this narrative stirred you, if Rubria's scratch echoes in your own refusals to vanish, leave a comment below. What line lingered? What parallel haunts? What question burns? These dialogues, grapplings in comment threads, are the new vigils tending history's flame against darkness. If you hold that voices like hers merit unburying, subscribe, not for spectacle, but for the silences still clamoring, every buried shard, every refused erasure. For the women who clawed Inviolata into bone. Nero ruled 14 years, built a system teaching every future despot how to ritualize ruin, purity to prop, but neither did their resistance. Vesta Inviolata, untouched, she endures.